When you built a project in Lesson 1.3, you might have noticed the Clean and Rebuild options in the shortcut menu. You'll learn how to use Clean and Rebuild in this lesson. To begin, open the Joe's Bar Web Application folder in Windows Explorer. You'll find it in your Sample Files folder. Now open the Bin folder and examine its contents. Whenever you build the project, a copy of its compiled code is placed into this folder, as well as the original compiled code in the OBJ folder. This happens regardless of which build profile you use. The Bin folder is only used by Visual Studio's debugger. These are the files that are used by the virtual web server when you run a project in debug mode. Now open the Joe's Bar Web Application project in Visual Studio. Don't close Windows Explorer, as you'll return to the Bin folder in a moment. Now build the project. To do this, right-click Joe's Bar Web Application in the Solution Explorer and click Build from the shortcut menu. Building the project compiles its code into a DLL file, but a new DLL file will only be created if the code has changed. Note that the project is automatically built every time you start debugging. Now return to the Bin folder and examine the files again. If you look at the Date Modified fields, you can see that building the project has not changed the DLL files. The code hasn't changed since it was last built, so Visual Studio doesn't bother to recreate the files. Note that the mailmodule.dll and mailmodule.xml files are never updated when you build this project. This is because mailmodule.dll was not created by this project's C# code. You added mailmodule.dll to this project in Lesson 1.2. Now return to Visual Studio and clean the project. To do this, right-click Joe's Bar Web Application in the Solution Explorer and click Clean from the shortcut menu. Now return to the Bin folder again. The Bin folder is now completely empty. Cleaning the project removes all of the compiled files from the Bin folder. Cleaning also removes the compiled files from the OBJ folder for the selected build profile. For more on this, see Lesson 1.3. Return to Visual Studio now and build the project again. Now examine the Bin folder again. The compiled files have reappeared, but if you look at the Date Modified fields, you can see that Joe's Bar Web Application.dll has actually been recreated this time. The mail module files have also been copied from the location pointed to by this project's references. This is a more complete way of rebuilding your project, but it's a little inconvenient to both clean and build every time you want to do this. This is why the Rebuild option exists. Return to Visual Studio now and rebuild the project. To do this, right-click Joe's Bar Web Application in the Solution Explorer and click Rebuild from the shortcut menu. This is exactly the same as first cleaning and then building your project. Examine the Bin folder one more time. The Date Modified fields show that the files have been completely recreated, even though the code has not changed. Since your project automatically builds whenever you publish it or run it in debug mode, you rarely need to build it manually. On rare occasions, Visual Studio will not recognize changes to your project, and they will not be visible in debug mode. If this happens, you should use the Rebuild option to force Visual Studio to completely recompile your code. There is really never any reason to use the Clean option, followed by Build, as using Rebuild does both in one operation. Close Visual Studio now, and you've now completed Lesson 1.4, Build, Rebuild, and Clean a Project.